Suzanne takes you down to her place near the river.
No teaching, no teachers, no students. Meaning that if you have a teacher, it means that I know something that you don't know, and then I have to come up with teaching to teach you what you don't know. And this is what really makes Radical Awakening work. It's a direct pointing to who you are so that what you already know is coming to the surface.
That was Ramana. That's his only name. He's our guest for today's podcast.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know that she will trust you.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Taylor. Welcome to my podcast, Searching for Unity in Everything, Meaningful Conversations with Meaningful People. You'll see on my logo, which is my website, Sue Speaks. Sue stands for Searching for Unity in Everything. How can we turn this world around? I mean, can we turn this world around? Well, everything I've done has been in that pursuit, buoyed up by that famous quote by Margaret Mead, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." My guest today goes by one name, Ramana, and he is no stranger to me. In fact, we go back 20 years where he was teaching, actually, biofeedback, transpersonal psychology, hypnotherapy, things that are in our therapeutic community to the day. Creative visualization was another thing he was teaching. And then there was another track that he became adept at and delved into, which was the ancient teachings from the Indian masters, from a lineage that started with the great Indian saint, mystic, Ramana Maharshi, and he had a disciple named Papaji. Papaji had students, among them Ramana. Papaji sent out a wave of teachers at some point 20-ish years ago. When this wave of teachers hit LA, and I found Ramana, who actually lived in my house for a while, and we developed his United States teaching in my world. These teachers were teaching this kind of spirituality that didn't have any guru that they were following, but were being taught how to be the God within themselves. And we actually invited all of those teachers to come together to make a great wave of teaching where we would share our mailing lists and put everyone under the same umbrella just to have the power of community and the power to spread the word further. Well, guess what? Humans are humans, and all these wonderful spiritual teachers did not want to share their mailing lists. But we did very well in our little world here. We really developed a beautiful, beautiful community. And he has several communities now in other places in the United States. So now, time to turn to him. Hello, Ramana.
Hey.
Why don't you start out by telling us something about, well, your childhood. How about that? I know you grew up in the 60s, and that was an influence on you. How about giving us a little sense of what that was like and where your head was at the time and how that prepared you for where you are today?
Yeah, okay, good. So what I see in my current work and the work I've done throughout my life is like amalgamating different kind of schools of thought. And I really started out with that as a child, I was going to a Buddhist temple and a Christian church at the same time. Since my mother was Christian, my father was very devout Buddhist. So I was shuttled back and forth between temple and church. So I really got the sense of what the Eastern and the Western is. And it was up to me at that time, even at a young age, to try to integrate, because a lot of things didn't kind of fit in. But then throughout that, I found that there was this kind of essential truth that followed through all of it. So when there was a marriage of so much psychological work I did, I was working with Gestalt therapy at its early beginnings in 1968. I was in a Gestalt therapy group 5 days a week for an hour for 2 years. So really got exposed to Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls' work. Then when I started studying spirituality, it seemed like they just seem so different, the psychological approach and the Eastern mystic approach. And then I started finding that there's these beautiful ways to meld them together. So I would say that my past is really kind of coming from that place of taking very disparate philosophies and finding some beautiful way to put them together that creates a unique combination.
That's fabulous. What a wonderful background to be able to harmonize these seeming opposites.
Yes, right.
And yet, what we really are in is a one life. So to be able to get tuned in that way, I actually didn't know that part of your story. I like that part of your story. The other thing that our listeners will find out if they go to the material that we'll have posted about you is how astonishing your background is. I mean, it would take too long to really go through all the masters and the teachers and both the psychological traditions and the spiritual traditions that you have worked with and studied with. I am radically impressed by that. What I really want to get into with you is what makes you tick. I think that I'm sharing that in all of my podcasts. People whom I think highly of, if they reveal where their inspirations came from, I think that's very informative for our audience and very helpful. But I do want to say before that, because I don't want it to get lost, I want to say a word about the specific work that you do that's very different from all the others, even all those other teachers who came from your teacher. What I loved about your work that you call Radical Awakening, and then I like that little tagline, never take another workshop to find yourself again. That's really quite true. And I am among others who have had this astonishing experience in working with you, particularly in private sessions with you, where you tune us in to that eternality, that oneness, that consciousness that all arises from, and we sense ourselves to be that. That is something I've never had from any other teacher, and why I was so excited about working with you and why I did so much to promote your work. So I didn't want that to get lost in the further conversation I want to have with you about what makes you tick. So first question.
Before that,
okay.
Can I just make a quick comment about
course.
that? Because I do want to, a lot of people say that, well, I kind of have the sense that already. I've experienced it, But what I heard about you is it sticks. In other words, it is experienced in such a profound and deep way that it's never forgotten. The thing that's different in Radical Awakening is it's all done eyes open, and it is designed to bring the meditative state into your everyday life.
Well, I can speak to that because I remember in our session 20 years ago when we were proceeding, you were taking me and guiding me, and I was going deeper and deeper into what this understanding was. And all of a sudden you said to me, you tapped me and you said, "You're there." And I knew where I was.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's where there is. And it's like a Pavlov dog thing. You can tap me now and I can go to that place.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the place.
Yeah. It's the place where you actually discover who you really are.
Well, that is a way to describe it, isn't it? But that is a kind of beautiful, poetic way to describe it. Effective way to describe it.
Beautiful.
Okay, so back to your story.
Yes.
In the course of this studying that you have done and this becoming the teacher that you are, was there any particular moment of awakening? Like we have these, well, like I just described to you, that was like a big aha for me. Now, did you have some aha along the way that you could share with us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really how I came to it was I first heard about Papaji through some friends of mine. What I saw was there was not a change in them, but a shift. And the shift was their actual sense of their identity, who they are, went from the personality to something larger, and they expressed their lives through that. In short, people were saying there's a man in India who not only wakes people up, but he embodies that. And I remember watching a video one time of somebody who had seen Papaji recently, during that time, and he said, if you have the most expression of what it is, and that person is that convey that to you, why would you not want to be there? And that just lit up something like I could not answer the question no to that. It's like I have no reason. If there's somebody like that and they're passing that on, it doesn't matter. And I'd never been really out of the United States before, so I took my big journey to India to stay with them.
You know, it's funny. That was going to be my next question, which is what got you to study with Papaji of all these teachers you studied with and all this work you were doing? What got you to shift over? Because that was really your major avenue or major start to what you're all been up to for the last 20 years.
Well, what's interesting is how I came to that. I was really in a place of not knowing what to do with next in my life, because all of the work that I did in the psychological work, and when I started getting into hypnotherapy, into past life regression work, and then moving into the collective unconscious, what I realized that at one point is there was this myth that I was running by that I thought was truth, which is they said if you can get to the core of what it is, you know, by going through the layers of the onion and you get the core, then you're free. Now, in everything that I was doing, what I started finding out is that there is an endless amount of leaves. And people may even identify this, so they feel like, wow, I'm so glad I worked through that deep pattern and now it's over with, you know? And then the next layer comes up. And what happened when I started to discover is that I had an insight that there is an endless layers coming up this way. I didn't know what to do then, because I actually ran into the Scientologist one time, and he said, you know, I came to the same conclusion and I was really lost like you were, but then it came to me, the answer. And I said, oh, I'm all about this. What is it? And he says, I'm devoting my next 10,000 lifetimes to Scientology. And I'm going, no, I think I'm looking for something else, right? When I met Papaji, when he told me to he said, working with the mind and the content of the mind and going into like the past to try to heal the past. He says, the problem is the one that is trying to do the healing is the one that's the problem. So he said, you have to go outside of that whole set. And I had no idea what outside of that set was, because that's all I knew. So I would say that the piece that I would call my awakening is I got to see that I was outside that whole mechanism. And that mechanism which identified me was not who I was. And whatever was witness to this was who I was. And then when I started exploring the qualities of what that was, it's much more than just a perceiver, observer. It is a full-bodied experience of heart and compassion and being totally involved without being involved. And that's for what I'm calling awakening when I call the work radical awakening. It's really an awakening of the heart. It's awakening compassion and goodness and tenderness and love and goodness and generosity, kindness. All of these things are all aspects. They're not things that we're working towards in our personality to become more of. It is actually a reflection of our true nature. So as we reflect on our true nature, those things just come up naturally.
That is such a sweet way to see things, you know, to see that we are all these beautiful things, and then life has done its number on us as, you know, the human predicament. But that in truth, that if you can really tune in to what's primal, what's before all of that.
Yeah, prior to. Right.
Yeah, and that we are beautiful creatures underneath all the crust, you know?
Yes.
Yes, this is a beautiful kind of gestalt to understand life within, about. Now, do you have any particular sense in your work, in your being, that you have some particular mission? Are you here to do something particular?
Actually, I don't know if it's really mine, but it was given to me. But I am in alignment with it for sure. So this is how I can say, I think this is what it's all about for me. Papaji said that one time, that the purpose of life is to know yourself as pure love and pure consciousness, and having that bring about an experience of peace. And what the purpose of life is not only knowing that, but sharing that. So when he gave me the name Ramana, which felt like it carried its own weight by itself because he hadn't ever given anyone the name of his teacher before. Just as an aside, this is kind of funny. I mean, when Papaji first gave me that name, it was very silent. in the whole satsang room when he gave me the name, because he hadn't done that before. And then my friends had lined up two sides of me as I was walking out, and they were kind of chiding me. And as I was walking out the room, there's about 7 of them. They're all bowing. They're going, "Oh, Ramana, oh, Ramana, oh, Ramana." I think, oh, my God, what am I getting myself into here?
Really? Well, Ramana Maharshi was quite a forebear to be named after. It's like being named Jesus in another tradition, and, as if somehow that relates to the real original Jesus.
As kind of a mission, what I saw was that, and I do want to make a kind of slight correction, that Papaji really wasn't into teachers. In fact, one time Papaji was asked, can you summarize in one sentence what your message is? And he said, no teaching, no teachers, no students. Meaning that if you have a teacher, it means that I know something that you don't know, and then I have to come up with teaching to teach you what you don't know. And he said, who we are is inherent. And this is what really makes Radical Awakening work. It's a direct pointing to who you are, so that what you already know, what you've always known, is coming to the surface. That's why he wasn't big on teachers. So what he did is he said, I'm sending messengers out. A messenger is one that you be the message that can carry it out. So your life becomes your message.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That's so much consistent with this kind of emergence from duality, right and wrong, black and white, into this wholeness is a much more evolved kind of way to perceive things and to be.
And it was really his master's teaching to Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was asked one time, it's a very legitimate question. He says, he gave an analogy, a student was giving an analogy of, you've been up the mountain, you know all the footholds, you know all the handholds. Can you teach us what we need to know about being on the top of the mountain? And Ramana Maharshi's answer to that was, all we really need to do is get rid of the idea that I'm up here and you're down there.
Oh, how sweet. How sweet all this is. Really, it's so sweet. So it's very nice to be in the presence of sweetness. What do you think about humanity? Do you think we are going to be okay?
But one of the things that I feel like is really important is that we never give up, no matter how hard it looks and how impossible it looks. And sometimes it can look so grim that you feel like there's not even 1% possibility, that I think it's really important that we just stay with it and not ever give up.
Well, there's also a whole perception or school or understanding that from the depths, that's what kind of kicks us into the light.
Very much so.
And that's very much on my mind these days with our current administration, that maybe it's going to be so bad, or it is so bad, that it will make us look more deeply than we would have looked had we been in something that pasted over what some of the root causes of our dilemma are, which is this greedy corporate kind of world we live in, where the rich are being served, and we have to look more deeply. And the dilemma of how unpleasant the affairs are of state these days is driving us into more deep contemplation of what to do about it. So I think, I like to think of that as a hopeful thing.
Absolutely. In fact, this has all been predicted in Hinduism, where they talk about what's called the last age, which we're in right now, the Kali Yuga, where they say the forces of darkness get so huge, but it is like the light comes up further to absorb it.
Oh, beautiful.
It's all been the Kali Yuga. The things that are going on have all been predicted. So it's interesting. Thousands of years later, now we're finding this out to be true.
Wow. Wouldn't you like to come back in 1,000 years and see how it worked out?
Yeah, all right.
Really?
A time machine.
Really? Come on. I want to know how it all, how does this story go? So back to a little more personal kind of stuff. Could you speak to what makes my people I admire the most tick, as some sharing we can do with other people who might find more tickable things? What do you need in your life to feel satisfied?
I'm having to reorient a little bit just in my thinking, because I don't usually think in terms of what I need to be satisfied, just because I've kind of developed over the years that there is a basic resting in something that is full already. I mean, there are things I love to do. I love to dance. I mean, dance is a big part of my life.
I'm very impressed by all the teachers you studied with and all the ways in which you really have been a real dancer, not just somebody who goes to classes.
Yeah. And I travel with my guitar. So, so music and the arts and dance has always been, a creative expression for me. And it gets me moving in certain ways in terms of creativity that other things don't do. So there are things that I enjoy like that. I mean, there's these moments of an awakening process when a person just lights up. It feels like I'm witness to and graced to see a birthing of something and to be witness to this birthing of an awakening. I mean, people have told me that there are friends that I have that I've done a session with them 20 years ago, and they'll say, I think of you every day just because, the state that I'm in, I've associated you with that. And that oftentimes happens with teachers with someone who has awakened to you, it's like it's always kind of the reference point. So there's something feeling very privileged in a way to be witness to this birthing.
Well, I think that's quite beautiful also. I think about myself and I'm thinking in a whole other track of I need to be creative and I need to be appreciated, but that's very human. And
of course.
You're in I don't know that, dancing, whatever, is not human, but it's not your needs, it's more your joy.
Yes, right.
I need more of that. I need more of the what's my joy, instead of what my needs are. Oh, well. I'm glad you're back after 20 years. Yeah. It's really such a pleasure to reconnect with you. And I think perhaps on that note, is there anything more you can think of that you would like to say that I haven't asked you about? I'd be very happy for you to pipe in here.
I know that you asked another person a question about if there's a one-liner or one kind of thing, that you could say, and I was considering that, and I really can't come up with something better than what the Dalai Lama said. So I just have to tag what the Dalai Lama said, where he said, I only have one religion, and that is kindness.
Oh, isn't that perfect, really?
It just speaks to what the heart really is.
If that were the world's religion, wouldn't this be a different place? To that hope and that end, thank you so much for gracing my podcast with your presence.
Oh,
really.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Really, it's been a great pleasure for me.
Oh, Suzanne takes your hand and she leads you to the river.
So, dear listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of Searching for Unity in Everything, Meaningful Conversations with Meaningful People. Be sure to check out suspeaks.org/podcast, where you can find out more about our guests, subscribe to our podcast, and leave your comments and feedback. We'd love to hear from you. How did you feel about what you heard? Did you learn anything? Or were you inspired to act in any new way? Or do you perhaps disagree with anything that was said? Also, while you're on our website, do explore and comment on some of the other content. There's a cup of consciousness for everyone.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you can trust her, for she's touched your perfect body with her mind.